Hi everyone, welcome to this GAD Week Facebook Live. My name is Dr. David Purvis and I'm your resident psychologist. So please say hi, say hello if you're able to log on and let me know that you're here. I hope that everything is as it should be, although there's always a few moments of kind of trepidation when you're starting a live broadcast because I'm seeing the live broadcast, but I'm not seeing what you're seeing. So I hope that you're able to see what I'm seeing. So please do say hello so I know that we're in the right place doing the right kind of thing. Good. Yes. So I see we have one or two eyeballs coming on now. So GAD week, let me just talk a little bit about it. Generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD, is probably the most common anxiety disorder that there is. It's the one that your doctor kind of determines that you have, let's say, when he gives you a GAD-7 questionnaire, which is what I gave you at the beginning of the week. So I hope you're participating in the GAD week in the sense of actually doing the homeworks and participating in everything, because that's the only way to get real value out of it, right? It's like I sometimes liken it. Hi, Linz, you're there. I got you. I see you. I sometimes liken it to learning to, ride a bicycle. You wouldn't read a book about learning to ride a bicycle. You'd ride a bicycle. Likewise, you wouldn't read a book about. Although, in fact, in fairness, I have lots of books about art, etc. But you've also got to put pen to paper as well. So, if you haven't done the GAD-7 questionnaire, please give it a go and try it, because I'll tell you why. You have to measure it. If you don't measure it, it's not going to get managed. And also, hi Louise, and also if you don't measure it, you forget how bad you were, let's say. So in a sense, you forget where you were, and you're more likely to kind of discount the progress that you've made. So are we on the right place, everybody? Good. So are we on the right place, Louise? Are you on Mental Health Wizard? Is everyone on the Mental Health Wizard page or on the drpurvis.online page? I think both of those are live right now, and you should be able to see what everything that's going on. There we are. So, what is generalized anxiety disorder? Well, I think it was yesterday or Monday, or Saturday, I think it was Sunday, that we posted a video that kind of talked about the structure of GAD. And there's two big things that we're going to deal with in this week. And one is the propensity to worry. Yes, I get you, Linz. Morning anxiety. One is the propensity to worry, and one is the overestimation. One is the intolerance of uncertainty. So these are the two big things that we're going to deal with in GAD week. However, in fairness, and I have to say that if you looked at the video about dimensional thinking, it's very easy to consider GAD to be like, well, any kind of psychological treatment. It's very easy to say, yeah, but I want it, please tell me what to do, fix it now. And we have to think of it as a dimensional thing, right? It's about progression. It's about doing a bit at a time and managing the whole thing kind of effectively, right? You've got to be able to do that. If you're looking for a quick fix, or if you're looking for something which is, almost magical in a way, magical thinking, then you're just not going to find that. So are we on drpurvis.online or are we in the Mental Health Wizard group? Can someone let me know which one that you're seeing this in? Because I'm just wondering if I'm in drpurvis.online. And perhaps I need to be a Mental Health Wizard. Can anyone let me know? Anyway, I'm going to press on because it will probably be, it'll probably end up in the right place. I promised that I would consider where your anxiety comes from, and then I would consider why you still have anxiety, and I would also answer questions. So Linz is on, and she's asked, can I have some advice about morning anxiety? Okay. It's queer, isn't it, that you can have a panic attack while you're asleep. how is it that you can have a panic attack while you're asleep, given that you're asleep? Well, the obvious answer has to be that your brain is processing fear-inducing images or fear-inducing thoughts whilst you're asleep, which basically means that your unconscious mind or your non-conscious mind is doing something, probably during dreaming, I'd have to say. So you're running a program in here that is continuing your day-to-day preoccupation with anxiety. Okay, so we have to do something that will change that experience. I mean, that seems fairly sort of obvious in a sense, right? My explanation is obvious. Hi, Tracy. Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with my tool, the Kilimanjaro experiment, because that's something that would probably be helpful to you. The Kilimanjaro experiment is an EMDR audio that you listen to at night, last thing before bed. Now, EMDR is a bilateral stimulation, so the music goes from one ear to the other and has a guided imagery where I take you up Mount Kilimanjaro. And when we did that, when we used that in the Facebook group where we measured anxiety before and we measured anxiety a week later, the average reduction was 50%. So it might seem that you're helpless to do anything about it if you wake with anxiety, but actually the answer is to do something before bed that reprograms your anxiety program, and typically that's quite a good thing. So I'll try and make that available to you after this, probably, or at some point later on today. But the general point is this, Lins. If you're feeling anxious, you are in general overestimating the threat that you're under, which in a sense brings me to questions of the origins of anxiety. And lots of the questions that I've had are really about threat. So for instance, Brenda said, today I gathered the courage to, repeating the mantra several times, to go outside of the cove near my place, a beautiful place where most people could relax and just be, oh no, not me. The whole time there, my thoughts were racing and the nagging thoughts of what if kept popping up. Yikes, so much for enjoying life. So, okay, that's, okay. So we're on drberbers.online. Oh, well. If someone could just mention to the Mental Health Wizard group that that's where we're here, but I think it might be simultaneously broadcasting to that, but I'm not completely sure. Using the mantra is a slow retraining process. So, and I appreciate, you know, the desire to see something kind of like pretty big happening, but it just doesn't work that way. We have to retrain your brain so that you recognize that you're not actually under threat. So I think what I'll do is I'll just talk a little bit about why you have anxiety in the first place, because I've met so many people over the years who say, I do not know why I'm anxious. And in fairness, that's you know, perfectly legitimate. I remember when I was young in my 20s, I had 2 panic attacks, both so strong that I had to find a gentleman's bathroom, and I had to lie down in a cubicle because I practically blacked out. The vision came in, my hearing went, cold sweat. You know, it felt like just like something horrendous and catastrophic, and there's nothing you could do. You know, I had to just lie down and wait until I recovered. But I didn't know they were panic attacks, actually. I just didn't know what they were. I thought, well, perhaps, you know, a salt, a lack of salt or something like that, you know. So it's possible to have panic attacks for no obvious reason. Okay, having said that, why might you be anxious? Well, hi, Jennifer. Everybody is on a number of continuums. So let's say there's a continuum of introvert, extrovert. And I'm, you know, I'm sure you'll think, well, I'm a bit introvert, I'm a bit extrovert, okay. But there's also a continuum that classically is called neurotic psychotic. And that doesn't mean that people are psychotic, but basically it's a bit more prone to anxiety, and it's a bit, the neurotic end, which is neuroticism is an old-fashioned term for sort of anxiety. It's a bit more prone to anxiety, and it's a bit more prone to being kind of what we might call narcissistic, and in fairness, a bit more objectively not very aware. So you could be like a psychopath, but so because it's a continuum, we could be really, 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 really anxious. We could be really, really, really psychopathic, or not really caring, or sociopathic. You're not being attuned. Okay. Now, good. Thanks, Tracy. Everybody is on that somewhere, and you just have to be on it. And so, if you think about your life experience, you may have some form of genetic loading, genetic heritage that perhaps would perhaps push you a little bit more towards the sort of the neurotic end, the prone to anxiety end. You might have had life experiences which are anxiety provoking. You might have vicariously seen your parents be anxious, or seen other people habitually worry, etc. But I think an even more important element, and it's just what it is really, human beings are very, very aware and sensitive to threat. And if you think about it, your ancestors, well, I say this and I'm sure it's right, you are a direct descendant of some of the first people that walked the earth. You've got to be, right? Because if you were not a direct descendant, you wouldn't be here, right? So your ancestors were acutely aware of threat, and they managed threat. Now, if you're a kind of a cave person kind of person, right, and you had a feeling of threat, you had to pay attention to it, because threat was incredibly important. If you failed even one time to pay attention to threat, you're likely to get extinguished. You're likely to get killed. Okay, and so we are acutely sensitive to threat. We're acutely aware of it. Now, how does that relate to us now? Well, your brain consists of different bits, but the top of your brain consists of 6 layers of cortex. Below that, you have what's called subcortical structures, and below that, you have what we might call the lizard brain. So basically, fish don't have cortex. Birds don't have cortex. Birds have subcortical structures, and then they have the lizard brain with the amygdala, the hippocampus, the cerebellum. Anyway, we developed the propensity to pay attention to threat before we had very much cortex, I would suggest. Now, that means that we were basically animals living on the Serengeti, looking out for threat and paying attention. And if threat doesn't present itself, we carry on. And if threat presents itself, then we kind of run away. Okay. But then over hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, we developed this layer of cortex on the top of our brain. Now, this cortex is what makes us different, because we can think, we have imagination, we have language, we have the ability to imagine stuff in the future. I do not think that a rat imagines the future very much. I don't think that they imagine catastrophic things happening, but we have the ability to do that. Now, you'll know that I make the distinction between external reality and internal reality, right? In external reality, in this world in which we live, you do not have a threat. Now, I hope you can kind of see that. Does that make sense to everyone? You don't have a threat. Now, I know you feel threatened, because that's what anxiety is, right? So that's overestimation of threat. I know you feel threatened, but you don't actually have a threat. It's really important to get that across, because everything that you do generally implies that you have an external threat, because you typically manage anxiety in the external world. I mean, even to the point of taking a medication, in a sense, you're managing it in the external world, right? But certainly, things like avoiding stuff, escaping for stuff, trying to control things in the external world, suppressing thoughts, trying to escape, all of this is external reality stuff. Well, your problem is an internal reality problem. Anxiety lives in here, and it lives in your imagination. It lives in your cortex. So what we have is a dysfunctional conjunction between your limbic system, which manages threat and many other things, and your cortex, which is able to imagine things that were never available when your limbic system was created. you could not imagine stuff when you're a fish. You could not have imagined stuff when you were a lesser hominid, let's say, maybe a Neanderthal, even further back. Okay, so in a sense, our powerful imagination is now our enemy. I hope that makes sense to you, because it's actually just the case. So when I look at the examples that you've posted, I always feel like something, Christian, I always feel like something bad's going to happen to me in the future, especially in social situations. I think that my social interactions are going to be awkward. I fear being judged or embarrassed. So I guess this is more social anxiety question, but it seems to strongly contribute to my GAD. Okay, that's a what if. That's a threat about the future. How do I stop Linz? How do I stop rushes of panic going through my body? As a partner, Louise, as a partner of someone with severe GAD, what do I do to try and help them? Does reassurance just reinforce long-term feelings? Fear is something we've read about. So these are all questions that everyone put, and in a sense, they come back to something similar. In that, almost irrespective of what's happened to you, you are where you are now, and you've had a history of responding to anxiety as if it's a real thing. Now, I know it feels like a real thing, and I get you. I know that you're frightened of feeling frightened, right? Okay. But what we have to do is we have to start from where you are and think about it like this, right? What is it that keeps your anxiety in place, given that you do not have a threat in external reality? Why is your body responding as if it needs to protect you? So if you're having panic attacks, for instance, your body's basically doing it's basically giving you all of the it's giving you all of the sort of the hormones that you need to fight or flee, but you've got nothing to channel them against, right? You wouldn't have a panic attack if you had someone to fight, but because you don't have anyone to fight, you have a panic attack instead. So Lynn says, I know it's my thoughts that cause my anxiety, but I can't stop the thoughts. It feels like it's constantly niggling away in my head. You can't stop thoughts. I mean, that's not how these things work. Your brain is constantly processing stuff. But the question, let's ask a question then. Why am I still anxious? Okay. There's tons of really, I mean, I'm past doing this sort of stuff now, but there's tons of really clever people putting a lot of effort into understanding the psychology of things like anxiety. Okay. Now, we can say with absolute certainty that some of the things that you do as sort of consequences of anxiety then create other things that you do that keep the anxiety in place. So for instance, tomorrow you'll get a video about intolerance of uncertainty. If you felt unsure about this, if you felt unsure about the future, if you felt threatened, and so you had to make sure that things were certain, you had to have control over things, life is inherently uncontrollable, and therefore you feel that you need to worry, which is basically trying to solve problems that don't exist. Worry is solving fantasy problems. Now, doing those two things just by themselves is sufficient to keep your anxiety in place. You might say, yeah, but I can't help but worry. That's not actually true, right? Because we're going to be getting some tools to start doing some management of worry. So worry keeps everything in place. It keeps your anxiety in place. Brooding and ruminating. Now, ruminating is a backward-looking thing. That tends to make depression hold in place. Catastrophic thinking. Yeah, but I can't help but do catastrophic thinking. Well, you can, but you have to train yourself to not do catastrophic thinking. That means you've got to recognize it. Magnification of threat response. Now, Tracy, I'm going to try and share the screen. And I figured out how to do it earlier on, and now I don't know if I can do it. Right, okay. In that case, I did a drawing on my whiteboard, and then I took a photograph and I shared the screen. But let me just show you this. This is going to seem a bit strange, but This is my whiteboard. Okay. I don't know if that's going to be very visible to you. So the black line it says normal emotional response. Okay. Now, in fairness, I did the GAD 7. My score is 0. So that black line is my normal emotional response. Okay. This is specifically related to a question that Tracy put on. She said, why do I feel like I have to take off a popular song in case I cry at work? Okay. So I'm the black line, and we're going to call this the normal line. Do you see the red one? It says moderate response. This is someone who's moderately anxious or mildly anxious. Do you notice that it's a more emotional response? It's more up and down. And by more up and down, it means that you just feel more, right? I feel a bit more up and I feel a bit more down. And I say up, I mean aroused, right? A bit more stressed. And then this one, that's way up, right? That's panic. That's panic, that one. That's a severe emotional response. And so I call this emotional lability, which basically means you're more up and down. Now, the more, I'm just going to move this out of the way so you're just not distracting too much, and it makes the camera want to keep refocusing. Okay. Now, when you start being anxious, you fear the feeling of anxiety, and you try to avoid having that feeling of anxiety again. So you try to avoid it, you try to control the external world, you try to down-regulate it with alcohol, drugs, or medications. You suppress it, you try to escape. Whenever you focus your attention on something, you get more of. So when you focus your attention on down-regulating your emotion of actually feeling the physiology less, it actually gives that dysfunctional process more power over you. So trying to control the feeling of fear makes the feeling of fear worse. Now, does anyone disagree with that? Sorry, Julian. I'll post the picture. I did take a picture of that. I'll post it on the Facebook group straight after this, so you can see what I'm talking about. So, the trying to control the feeling of fear makes the feeling of fear worse. It also makes it feel like it's something that is important that you have to manage. But the thing is, if we can get this message into your kind of brain, then it really kind of will start to make a difference. You do not need to feel frightened of fear. You don't need to feel frightened of the feeling of fear, and you don't need to feel frightened of what we might call the symptoms of fear, the symptoms of anxiety. And we've got to withdraw that feeling of fear from the symptoms of anxiety. Now, the way that we've started to do it is this, right? The feeling of anxiety makes you feel frightened, and it makes you believe that you're at threat from something. So the comment, there was a comment about the dishwasher. So Tina says, you're describing me. This is exactly how I am. The washing machine is an issue for me. I'm terrified it's going to leak and flood the place. I'm the same with the radiators too. I have a real fear of water leaking and causing a problem. Okay, that is the cognitive bit of fear, right? So basically your brain's saying, why am I frightened? Oh, because, well, what if the washing machine breaks down and floods the place? And that focuses your attention, because otherwise it's just what's called free-floating anxiety, and it doesn't have a focus. That focuses your attention. Yeah, okay. But it's not real. It's just your brain attempting to control the feeling in some way by giving it a focus. So now you feel like you can do something about it, right? You don't use the washing machine, problem solved. But the problem's not solved, because the washing machine wasn't the problem, and the feeling of fear that you have about the washing machine is illegitimate. It's not real. It's a fantasy. Now, in the end, we want the feeling of fear to be acknowledged. I feel frightened, okay. My anxiety symptoms are up, okay. But actually, I am safer than I feel I am. right? Do you see what we did with this mantra? We said, just because I feel this doesn't make it true. Just because I think this doesn't make it true. This is the only way. I see. Okay, I've spoken to you there, Gillian. You have a fear of leaks. This is the only way of recalibrating your brain, right? We cannot recalibrate your brain to be non-anxious by doing what the anxiety tells us to do. Escape, avoid, hide, suppress, take a medication, try to do false control strategies. None of that will resolve anxiety, which is why medications don't resolve anxiety, because medications are a medical solution for a psychological problem. Now, you might not believe me. You might say, well, if I don't worry, something bad might happen. You might do something superstitious, right? If I don't check and check and check and check and check, something bad might happen. If I don't do something, such as worrying, for instance, I'm kind of inviting the problem. And this is called a metacognitive belief about worry. Basically, if you remember my picture about the elements of GAD, believing that worry is useful is one of the things that maintains the problem. Okay, so we've got to really retrain your brain so that you go, okay, I get it. Worry is not useful. I need to stop worrying, and I'll start using some worrying tools and some worry tools. And on Wednesday, you'll be getting a tool to use for worry. Just one of the tools that I've created. Okay, so we have to set our face completely against the idea, A, that anxiety is in any way legitimate. B, the fears that you have about whatever it is that might happen are simply ways that your brain makes sense of why you feel threatened. And C, that anything which is not directly an internal tool directly targeted at the problems of fear and worry is irrelevant. Okay, so you could have a massage and it'll make you feel nice. It's irrelevant. I'm not suggesting don't have a massage. I'm saying it's irrelevant. You might say, well, in fact, I get questions about medications, right? A medication will not cure anxiety. It will just help you to manage the symptoms. Now, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But it's not what we're about here, because it's irrelevant. So, Gillian and Tina, put the washing machine on, don't put the washing machine on. It's irrelevant. The only thing that's actually relevant is to downregulate, is to extinguish, is to reduce the feeling of fear and the fear of the fear. And we do that by going through a whole process of retraining the beliefs that you have about this thing called anxiety. Now, I was just doing some research before I got on about the relationship between neuroticism, brain structures, and anxiety. And it was kind of interesting. I was looking at a research paper. They did functional magnetic resonance imaging studies of people who were kind of chronically anxious. Okay, so they scanned their brains, and then they give them 14 sessions of CBT, and then they scan their brains again. And one of the big things that they found was that the change in the over-focus on physical symptoms was a big correlator of clinical success. So what does that mean? It means that people who are severely anxious over-focus on the importance and the meaning of what's happening in their body. And after 14 sessions of therapy, they focused on that less, and you could see that reflected in the parts of the brain that were activated, etc. Okay. So the question from Tim is, why is anxiety on the increase? I guess, why is it on the increase? Well, what is it that you're doing to challenge anxiety? I mean, we live in a world which is, I would suggest, massively over-medicated. And so very little, I mean, cognitive therapy is very, very effective, but very little actually challenges the anxiety. Very little actually makes a difference. What you end up with is people being chronically anxious, chronically depressed, etc. So there is an increasing culture of fear about. People are more fearful, and because we have more media, we're able to use our imaginations a bit more to envisage threats that never would have bothered us, 100 years ago. So I think depression is definitely increasing. It's possibly by now the largest burden of disease in the world. That's depression, right? Depression is a psychological problem. It's treated with a medical, i.e., a pharmaceutical solution, which doesn't, it's just a management strategy. It's the same with anxiety. What I'm suggesting to you here, and what I'm giving you in a sense, is the answer to anxiety. And without, you can do many things, but unless you actually get to the heart of it, unless you actually do the thing that's important to challenge and to change anxiety, nothing will change. So we end up with people having chronic problems. I commonly see people who've been on antidepressants for 20 years, and only now are they coming to see me. Only now are they actually starting to do something psychological. And in fairness, everyone's different, and people have different levels of insight, and people have different levels of tolerance. I'll often find it gets to be the case with the antidepressants and the anxiolytics that if you can get to a place which is tolerable, then you don't do anything. That's it. It's tolerable. Yeah, I don't go out in the evenings, but that's fine. You build your life around having the problem. Whereas I'd much prefer to work with people who are actually sick of having the problem and want to move forward and want to get back to some better level of functioning so that in fact the problem no longer exists for them. Anxiety and depression and panic are not necessary for life. These are just add-ons that we have acquired for whatever reason, various life circumstances, even trauma we've acquired. But then what we do with it once we acquire it keeps it in place and prevents it from moving on. And the kinds of things that keep it in place, just for people who've just joined, are avoiding it, trying to control it in the wrong way, trying to down-regulate the physical by, medications, drinks, drugs, etc., trying to suppress it, trying to escape, not realizing that anxiety is an overestimation of threat. It doesn't exist in the threat doesn't exist in the external world. It only exists in here. Therefore, we have to retrain our brain. Now, I would suggest to you, typically, when I'm looking at research trials, typically something like 13.5 sessions, 14 sessions, 12 to 14 sessions of CBT is powerful stuff for managing anxiety. You get and with GAD, easily 51%, 52% of people are cured after 11 sessions, for instance. So whatever the reason you think that you have anxiety, if you jump into a program of CBT, there's a very, very good chance, and it's dependent on how much effort you put into it. There's a very good chance that you will get to a point where you can recover and move on with your life. But here's the thing. If you said to me, Dave, I've got a problem with weight, I'm going to go on a diet. So I'm on a diet for 3 months. Right. Whew, that's it. I've lost the weight I wanted to lose. Now I'm going to get back to eating everything I want. What's going to happen? Do you think you put the weight back on? Well, of course you do. Everybody puts the weight back on. That's why dieting is not an efficient way to lose weight. Eating healthily and having a healthy lifestyle is an efficient way to lose weight. So I think you have to take an interest in your own psychological well-being. And I don't mean that as a way of just being introspective and catastrophizing and worrying. I mean, think of yourself as almost like a business, right? You have to work on the business, you have to develop the business, you have to think creatively about the business. You are important. You get one journey, as far as I'm aware. You get one journey, and you might as well have the best journey you can have, but only you can manage that journey. And if your journey is destroyed through something which is actually really quite treatable, if you go about it the right way, I think that's a shame. Now, I've just got a message from Kerry. Could a brain hemorrhage have made me have GAD and depression to a debilitating level? I had coped with depression for 25 years, working all through, but after minor spontaneous bleed, which was not an aneurysm or anything traceable, I become totally unable to cope with daily stuff. Okay. For a brain hemorrhage to do that for you, it would have to have affected some part of your brain that manages things like threat and etc., etc. And the thing is, if you don't have an obvious disability, I mean, if you can still think, if you're still aware, if you have your senses, I think it's much more likely to be an elevated sense of threat and a catastrophization that goes with that. So I would have thought that you could come back from that, Kerry. I mean, just generally, because people have many things happen to them and they can still come back. It's not what happens to you as a general principle. It's what you do with it. I've seen people have catastrophic, really dreadful accidents, but actually function really well psychologically. And I've seen people who have relatively little things happen to them and their life is destroyed. So there's a real big element of psychology in a lot of what happens to us. And if we manage it, if we manage it ourselves, if we think about, get some help potentially, but if we understand what's happening and we focus on it, then we can move forward. We can get much more of what we want. So Jennifer says, when you're on your own with no support, how do I find the motivation to push through out of my comfort zone to tackle my biggest problem? I panic when I go out. Well, Jennifer, we've spoken about this. There are things that you could do, but you believe that your anxiety is a limiting factor. So you're in a loop, right? I can't go out. We've talked about you volunteering, because in fact I think you'd be a fantastic volunteer and you'd be great at volunteering and you could go to help people. Yeah, but I can't go out because it's too far and I might have a panic attack. So that's you trapped, right? You're in a loop. You're not unable to go out. You believe that if you go out, you might have a panic attack. Let's put that in GAD terms. What if I have a panic attack when I go out? I don't know if I'm going to have a panic attack if I go out, which is uncertainty, right? I cannot tolerate this feeling of uncertainty because it ramps up my physiology, and therefore I stay home. And therefore we had this conversation a year ago, maybe even 2 years ago, and still you're allowing anxiety to tell you what to do instead of you telling anxiety what you're going to do. Well, if you allow anxiety to tell you what to do, it will only ever tell you, don't do it, try to avoid it, escape from it, do as little as possible, and try to not think about it, because that's the best thing. So it's only ever going to tell you, well, it's still applying, Jennifer, but a woman with your capabilities and your life experience and your skills and knowledge, still applying sounds a bit like not trying hard enough. I apologize. I apologize. I know you'll take it in the spirit in which it's meant, but if you let anxiety be in charge of you, well, it's going to tell you not to do it. Okay, so just to summarize, we need to be on the journey of convincing your brain that you do not have a problem in the external world, because you don't. Even if you have a disability, even if you have actual medical problems, okay, we manage these, right? Anxiety and depression, panic, stress, these are not necessary. These are optional extras that have come into our life, and we have allowed them to persist and to exist in our life. And we've actually brought them in as house guests, but like taking a tramp into the house, right? And the tramp takes over running of the house. You say, well, I wish this tramp wasn't here. I know, but he's taken over now. We can't throw him out. You've got to throw out anxiety, which means that every now and again, you're going to have uncomfortable feelings. It's not the point. How many times have you felt uncomfortable? How many times have you had a panic attack? How many times have you felt, like massively, whatever, right? So being upset and being stressed and being aroused, being like really, like, oh, I can't cope. This is nothing new to you. But believing that is a legitimate feeling keeps you trapped. So let's just reiterate, no matter what you feel related to anxiety, you are safer than you feel you are. Okay? You are safer than you feel. You have to believe that with every fiber of your body. And the more you believe it, the more freedom you get. But bear in mind, it's a journey, right? However long it's taken you to get here, it's going to take you a little bit of time to get to the next thing. So I was talking with Louise the other day. It's the 2 millimeter shift. You would think that, the things that people message me sometimes, I'm here and I want to get here. Well, you can't go from there to there because it's just too big a jump. But what people forget is that they move through time, right? All you've got to do is to make a 2 millimeter shift in what you do today and persist with that 2 millimeter shift tomorrow and the next day, and the next day. And what we have is we have a trajectory, right? That's the journey you have to be on. Now, the research suggests that you need about 12 to 14 hours of CBT. And that's the journey that we provided when we created Anxiety Wizard. So at the end of GAD week, I'll be opening up Anxiety Wizard again for anybody who wants to join, get on the self-help CBT program and journey out of anxiety, panic, anxiety, depression, and stress. And so you can't, it takes time and effort to reprogram your brain so that your brain gets the idea that actually you don't need to be anxious. And I say this to people, and the reason I say it is because it's evident, and I hear it a lot, which is nice. When people come to see me, I'll say, so what's been happening in your week? What's been going on? And they'll say, oh, I forgot to be anxious. I forgot to be anxious. You forget to have a problem. Okay. And that's where we're going to get to. When you've retrained your brain to believe that you don't have a problem, you forget to have a problem. So what we're actually trying to do is to teach your brain to believe what's actually true, rather than what you have been conditioning your brain. You have been conditioning your brain to believe that you need to avoid things, escape, run away, hide, do something, that's not at all related to anxiety, like control the external world, right? All of these strategies have been telling your brain that it needs to be frightened, it needs to be fearful. So Kerry says she's progressed. Okay, good. Could you have a specific goal in mind, Jennifer? I got out by going to a writers group so that I can learn things to do. Okay, so Tracy's joined a writers group. In fact, Tracy, actually publishes, joining a writers group, publishes, writes plays, writes radio plays and stories. So we reclaim our life one bite at a time. But once you've had enough bites, you're good to go, and it doesn't need to be a problem. But you still have to do exercise or you'll be unfit. You still have to have a healthy diet, otherwise you maybe go overweight. You still have to look after yourself because you are important, right? And not looking after yourself is a silly thing to do, really. Okay, so once we get to the point where you forget to have a problem, you still have to look after yourself. Anyway, I think we're going to pull it to a close. Well done, Louise. Louise had a day when she forgot to have a problem. Excellent. Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. So we're going to draw it to a close. I'll put the picture up that was on the whiteboard in a moment. And potentially, if people want to have another Facebook Live, we're going to have one on Thursday afternoon at 3:00. If we get questions, we'll certainly do that. So please, feedback. Thank you all for being in the GAD week. Okay. I really would appreciate if you'd share the stuff, okay? Because I see on Facebook, I try to adopt a scientific approach in that I'm telling you like it is, right? As I am saying it, this is what it is, and there are thousands and thousands of research papers and psychologists and everything, doing this kind of thing. So this is based on science. This is not based on miracles, magic, angels, or anything else. Okay, please share what we do with people that might find it useful in other groups, etc. Because I see an awful lot of people just doing stuff which is completely irrelevant and wasting their time and their hope, and I think it's a bit of a shame. David Saunders says, I've beaten GAD a number of times over the last 20 years. I could not leave the house, and a few years later, I was in Thailand. Excellent. So what changed? When you went to Thailand, you didn't feel at risk, right? When you couldn't leave the house, you did feel at risk. You are the same person. All that's changed was your perception of risk or your tolerance of uncertainty. Okay. So I'm going to end this now. Thank you very much. Please share it all, and I look forward to talking to you next time.